Hello, in this video I will shortly address some of the issues brought by Andy Stewart, the great music critic for rock, jazz, and jazz fusion from the UK. His biases and trying to correct them if I can. So, without further ado, I will start by looking at a second time the mm, list of the so-called overrated guitar players that he chose very carefully. Uh, um, I'm not I'm not going to go through all of them, but just through a few of them. So that allow me to concentrate on a few ideas rather than rush through all of them. Um, I not sure if the live recording is going as fast as it should be. I apologize for that. Uh, let's see. Um, no. Well, uh, I let's see if this is better. In any case, uh, mm, one of the first guitars that he found uh, terribly overrated is a Slash from Guns N' Roses, who he sees as a um, decline in quality after the so-called virtuosos of the 80s hair metal. In here, I'm talking about, I would say, even if he doesn't mention them, Van Halen, uh, uh, Mick Mars, Cecile DeVille, Tracy Guns, Richie Sambora, Steve Stevens, Reb Beach, Vito Batra, George Lynch, Jason Becker, and Marty Friedman, um, War, uh, War De Martini, Tracy Gunn, uh, Jake Leo, and Steve Vai. I would say, in my own taste, Steve Vai and Van Halen are uh, great musicians and innovators, and the others are good guitar players, and some very original, like Steve Stevens. The way he backs Billy Idol, I find it very original. It departs from the cliche that hair metal establishes, which is a song, sexist song, uh, usually indistinguishable from many others, and then at one point, virtuoso solo that is barely in, not recognizable in the context of the song. It seems that all of them could be substituted from one song to another. It would be all the same. Is a vehicle to show the velocity and the skill, which is amazing in the majority of cases of these guitar players. But then a Slash supposedly cannot match that quality. And I disagree with that because with Guns N' Roses, we come back to rock, not to corporations engineering bands as in the hair metal period. Guns N' Roses live the life of rock on the street, and that shows in their way of playing, singing, and in the playing of Slash, which he can go very fast too, but he doesn't use it very often. For example, in the song Paradise City, at the end, he shows how clean and fast he can play. And in the other songs like Sweet Child of Mine or November Rain or Civil War, he shows a rare melodic approach using scales that depart from the pentatonics and that carry the song. It's like a song within a song. Typically, he starts the solo with these slow melodies, and then he continues sometimes accelerating the solo until the end, that tends to be uh, less fast. So he tells a story with a solo, like in Sweet Child of Mine, and the dynamics of Sweet Child of Mine are kind of unique compared to all these other players that went before him in the 80s. Especially when he begins his run with the Wawa. He's back to Hendrix, back to uh, intensity and raw bluesy type of emotion and with skill, and that's one of the reasons why he was so successful, because the solo fit the song perfectly, and it was a surprise in the context of the type of solos that were common on MTV during that decade. So that's my reading of Slash and his qualities. And Michael Jackson liked him for that. That's why he called him to play with him. And he has a real interest with for the blues, playing with BB King even. And well, there we can see that that's not really his style, but something is there. And as we know, the blues is very emotional. You cannot fake it, and that's one of the reasons I like it so much. Because if you have it, you have it. If you don't, you don't. Um, it's similar to flamenco. Of course, skill is necessary, but at the same time, you cannot hide behind virtuosity. And there are many of virtuosos, believe me, even in the blues. Uh, for example, Paul Gilbert is an excellent blues player, and even Amy Walstein can play the blues uh, in a very impressive way, although he has a tendency of uh, going fast too early, as one might expect. But the emotion and the tension and the dynamics and the style unique style is there, which are the characteristics of a good blues player. Um, and another aspect of um, Andy is that it's very predictable the musicians that he is going to put down. I will give you a list of those that I thought that he would put down. Uh, Ray Davies, uh, Robert Wyatt, Billy Bragg, Gang of Four, Eastern Thrust, Roger Waters, Keith Tippett, Henry Cow, Courtney Pine, uh, Shava Hutchins, Emma Thackney, Simple Red, Johnny Mars, and even Mick Jagger. And of course, Joe Strummer would do the list as well. So, how many of these he has trashed? Well, so far I was right with Roger Waters, with Courtney Pine. Given the success and the importance, he basically has not said one single good thing about him. Simply Red, he destroyed the guy. Johnny Mars as well. Uh, Mick Jagger too, I would say, and definitely Joe Strummer. What are the characteristics of these individuals? Not that they are rich. Maybe some of them might have been upper middle class, but none is part of the elite that runs the country, which curiously and typically for the uh, new right, uh, they attack the upper middle class. That's one notch above them. But it's very safe because the people who run the show are the politicians and the top managers and the owners. So attack an academic or a musician that is, or a dentist, or the guy who is a little bit wealthier than you is very safe because they really have no power. So that's what happens here. And you can see in the case of Neil Young as a paradox. Oh, why did I mention Mick Jagger? Because he belongs to a tradition of British, say, aristocracy, who sometimes in Canada call red Tories, which they are not that uh, right wing in some aspects. For example, either immigration or uh, certain human rights. They don't like to see people homeless on the street. In fact, in spite of all his desire to be part of the elite of the country and mingle with the uh, rich and famous, Mick Jagger at one time was thinking of running for Labour. And the songs of the Rolling Stones that are the most political are his, like the one in Bush, in the Greater Bank against Bush, or the Street Fighting Men, for example. So He's in another category compared to the others. He's much more wealthy, but he has a little bit of this aspect. Uh, with regard to the other overrated guitar players, an example of what I was saying before is Neil Young. Why? Neil Young doesn't have any power of any kind. He's uh, in part First Nations, like say Indigenous Canadian, and he works basically alone. And he has been very vocal on some issues affecting, let's say, class inequalities, and also very critic of the U.S. Think of the Ohio when there were those killings, or Alabama, who apparently it was not a feud because they knew each other and they were in good relations, but uh, Lynyrd Skinner responded to his song with Sweet Home Alabama. Um, Very critical of US racism. That's what he's done with his songs. Like Andy, I have to recognize that personally I only like the songs in Harvest, which are purely acoustic, very bucolic, post 60s, 70s excess. And I think some of the songs there are good, the songs and the lyrics. Um, However, his constant politicization in the future, in my opinion, has to be respected. And when he does that song, I think in Saturday Night Live, uh, critic of the Bush administration, that's why the lyrics says 1,000 points of light. He was referring to a sentence of President Bush father. In that song that is ridiculed by Andy, I think that if you didn't live in the US during the 80s and 90s, you cannot really understand the meaning in that context to do that critique. And the solo is art of noise, as they say, something that Tom Morello can do very well because he's a good guitar player. Neil Young does it with a lot of limitations, but somehow that chaos and noises that solo fit the tone of the song, in my opinion. And this happens with other musicians, like, for example, one that is really a genius, which is the next so called overrated guitar player, which is Prince. But Prince, what can be said is that sometimes he does good solos, and the influence of Santana is there, but cannot be exaggerated because he doesn't sound Latin most of the time. Jimi Hendrix, yes, obviously there is a lot of it, and the way he uses guitar is in a way to produce a certain effect in his songs, not to showcase uh, skill in playing guitar. So, for I would say sound effect and um, in a given song with uh, certain type of guitar playing, either very distorted, like when the uh, doves cry, or in a epitone, as in Purple Rain. And I think he is very effective, and he can do anything. He can do, as I heard, Duke Ellington, and then move into funky, and then play a solo Jimi Hendrix, take the bass and do uh, some funky um, uh, song like the average white band um, uh, uh, play that funky music, White Boy, etc. I mean, he's a monster and a musical genius that had an extraordinary musical personality, vision, and skill, given that he could do so many things. And to center in the fact that he was not a very skillful guitar player, I think is uh, n- not fair, because that was never the point. And it's something that uh, you don't even notice unless you are very analytical of the guitar. I think the point is to listen to the whole of his songs and performances. And he's one of the greatest entertainers. He can appear like Charlie Chaplin or Maurice Chevalier and play like Hendrix and do a show where he steals the show, like in the famous solo of While My Guitar Gently Weeps. It was relatively simple, but he was hitting the right notes, there was emotion, and it was a great performance because he's a great entertainer. The guy had it all. So that's what um, is left for me, rather than analyzing how he plays the instrument technically or not. Another case in which he does a horrible solo is in that song, a rock and roll song called Beach. And one would expect a kind of Chuck Berry solo in the middle of that tune. Nonetheless, he goes into a free guitar solo, uh, completely off the key, and somehow it works. I don't know. It works, even if it's wild and unexpected, and that's the kind of thing that only Prince can get away with, in my opinion. So, um, and for the case of John Mayer, I agree. Although to just put Stevie Ray Vaughan as one more of these emerging guitar players, I agree. Robert Cray is terribly underappreciated. He should be at the top, but so should be Steve Ray Vaughan. Uh, he showed definitely that you can be a great bluesman and be white. He was accepted by many of the greats, including Albert King. His performance at the Carnegie, for example, in The Sky is Crying, is historical. He is, uh, has a force like the other Texan, Freddie King. And I think that Jeff Healey was very good as well. And I think these three were the best blues, the young blood, as we can call them, of the 80s. With regard to the other numbers, that's a difficult assessment because there are many uh, coming from many bands like the John Mayall, Montoya, and Walter Trout, many. But with the three uh, heroes that come from the rock blues in the United States, Robert Cray and Ray Vaughan would be at the top in my view. And of course, there is one that is, in my opinion, even at a much higher level, which is uh, Robin Ford. And many great guitar players now refer to him as an influence. Unfortunately, rock blues fusion were not that uh, popular in the 80s and 90s. Otherwise, one could see easily that the creativity and innovation to the blues that brought uh, Robert Ford and the Blue Line is definitely comparable to that of Cream in the early 60s. And they have a lot of records out, even one recently, Live at Yoshi's and those of Montreux, would suggest to listen to the solos of Robert Craig. And the idea is how, coming from the blues, you can play the best blues as well, incorporating jazz. A little bit what Timon Walker did. And yes, uh, some my favorite blues are played by uh, usually jazz musicians that play blues or blues uh, players that enter into jazz territory. In the first case, I would include Keith Jarrett playing blues, as in the Carnegie Hall uh, tune True Blues. So that's all for today, and thank you for listening.